Paul Ryan makes a peace offering on immigration, but like Robert Mueller listening to Rudy Giuliani, should we believe him? Apple held its annual Geek Fest for developers last week, but does the future of tech include Black and brown people? Summer is in full swing, but where should you go and what should you do? And how can nonprofit organizations in historically marginalized communities actually get the coins to be successful? All that and our hot tea segment on today's The Last Sip. Come sip our tea. Welcome to The Last Sip. Before we turn to this week's news, I wanted to share some news. No, I'm not pregnant, but our show is taking a break. Today marks the last episode of our initial pilot season on air. We're going to pause, inhale, not quite like that, and take all that we've learned so that we can come back bigger and better. When we started 9 weeks ago, our goal was to produce a news program that looks like America right now and is relevant to the needs of historically marginalized communities. We think we've done that and are grateful for the journey that we have all been on with you over the last 2 months. But don't get your handkerchiefs out just yet. We'll be rolling out new content over the summer, including a docuseries about my ongoing transition and that of other trans and gender nonconforming people at this time of political backlash. And on June 30th, we're starting a new The Last Sip Facebook Live interview series where we will talk with someone really smart for 5 minutes about a newsworthy event from the week. Moreover, we will keep our ongoing social media activity on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram that you all have responded to so well. So before you know it, we'll be right back on. One last thing, in an era of distraction, you have given us your attention. There's no greater gift that you can give someone other than your time, and for yours, I am eternally grateful. On to the first sip. Facing a revolt from House Republicans, Paul Ryan agreed late last week to write and introduce legislation which could clear the way for 800,000 people who were brought to the United States as children and registered under President Obama's DACA program to remain here legally. But what does that mean exactly, and where are we on basic human rights for those immigrants who are in detention and awaiting hearings? Here to discuss that with me is Jorge Rivas, senior staff writer at Splinter. Jorge, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
To start out with the fact that we talk about the 800,000 people who are in DACA as dreamers, but actually dreamers, that is to say people who were brought to the United States before they were 18, are actually nearly 4 million people, but 800,000 of them are those that registered. So I wanted you to just talk about that and how we use that interchangeably. And actually, there's a conversation, I understand it, in amongst the Latino and immigrant communities to make sure that we don't actually cleave those two, to make sure that we don't have legislation which says, okay, 800,000 can stay, but 2.4 million have to go who didn't register.
So you mentioned a lot of numbers, but there's 11 million people here. There's 11 million undocumented, an estimated 11 million undocumented immigrants here in the U.S.
Yeah.
And you're right that there's a small percentage of those that were brought here as young people. So they came to the U.S. and entered illegally or overstayed a visa before they turned 16. And a lot of them have finished high school here, and they are often referred to as dreamers. At Splinter, the publication where I work, we do not use that word because we think that it glorifies a very specific and select few group of people. Mm-hmm. They're young people who we often hear who were brought here at no fault of their own. And what happens when you hear that is that it subconsciously places the blame on their parents, who some would argue are the original dreamers because they're the ones who came to the U.S. seeking a life, fleeing violence or all sorts of things.
Hope. One of the things that you've spent a lot of time reporting on and doing great reporting, and everyone should be following you, is on the terrible abuses that are reported at the border and in detention centers. I'm wondering, there's been a lot of attention on that from U.S. senators down to people at the local level. I'm wondering what's the latest on this particular issue.
Immigration and Customs Enforcement, they say that they treat detainees with respect and that they care about their health. And but that's not what the detainees I've spoken to say. That's not what immigrant rights advocates say. At this point, more than half of the 40,000 people who are in detention are in private detention centers. And they tend to be in locations where we hear more complaints about healthcare access. We hear more complaints about the quality of food. Many of them have to work in, one of the more controversial issues is that many of them claim they are being forced to work for very low pay or no pay at all.
There's no other way to describe that. That is de facto modern day slavery. That's what everyone calls it when it's in private U.S. prisons, and now it's clearly happening in detention centers.
And so I think the question now is, can we get Latinos to the polls? And the hope is that that Trump, that rage can turn into some sort of action.
Is something that I really appreciate. And again, I do hope that people follow you and follow your work. It's really important in terms of providing insight into what's going on. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you, and congratulations on your first season.
Thank you. Thank you so much. For more information about immigration and how to help, please visit our website, www.thelastSip.org, and click on How to Help. We'll be right back. Last week, the largest technology company in the world, Apple, held its annual meeting of developers. You know, the people who you've never heard of who are making the apps and the programs that will run your life. Online video, like our show, continues to be the fastest growing segment of the internet, with virtual reality, or VR, one of the key technologies of our video consumption future. Apple's new operating to be released this fall even contains a version of VR called augmented reality, or AR, built in. But are there people of color and historically marginalized communities in this brave new future? Here to discuss that with me in the studio is Katrina Jones, Director of People and Inclusion at Vimeo, and by Skype, Princess Ojaku, a neuroscientist who wrote a groundbreaking article about Black women in VR for Vice last year. In full disclosure, I should say that our show's video is hosted on Vimeo. Katrina, year after year, we hear about tech companies promising to hire more diverse talent and to diversify. But it seems as if often the statistics are remaining the same, right?
Yeah.
So Facebook is around 3% African American, for example, I think 6% Latino. Vimeo is 4% African American. And so I'm wondering, what are the challenges to hiring a diverse workforce, if any, and what are companies like Vimeo doing about it?
Well, part of the challenge is that there's a tremendous focus on hiring when the focus needs to be on hiring, and also progression and promotion for those people who are already working within the company from those underrepresented groups. And so within hiring, we have to rethink how we define and assess talent. And in the past, what we've done is assess talent by filtering and excluding people from the application process or the recruiting process. And what we need to do is take a more inclusive, expansive approach to say we are looking at talent in a myriad of ways, and there is no one single type.
How do you go to some person and say, you know what, you are looking kind of under the wrong places or in the wrong places, so change that?
So a couple of ways. One, when people start talking about somebody being not the right fit, or that they just didn't seem like they have it, you need to press them, to push them to say, what do you mean? Tell me what's behind that. Help me unpack that. What is it that they're really saying when they say something like that? And you have to get people to actually stick to, in a quantitative way, how do you define this talent?
Princess, in your article that you mentioned, sort of shifting more to the content creation side from the corporate side, you spoke about Hyphen Labs, which is led by two women of color who are using Afrofeminism in VR to combat sort of the effects of racism and other isms. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I actually first came across them at South by Southwest, and they were presenting some of their products, and that's how I discovered like all the things they were doing, like using VR to kind of put people into another person's shoes, and also creating these products to help people, discover what things they might have not have thought about before.
A lot of times we hear that one of the issues is their pipeline issues, right? There are not
Yes.
enough people that have skills, and so we need to focus on people that are now 5, and then in 20
Yes.
years from now, we'll be able to have
Yeah.
them have jobs. But I mean, it's clear that there are people right now who know how to create VR experiences
Yes.
and have the skills to be able to do what they need to do in order to be a part of that. How do you go about folding the existing talent, or letting people know, or sort of going to existing talent and
Yeah.
finding existing talent and bringing them in? We spoke a little bit about what it's like on the manager side,
Yeah.
but what is it? How do you get the people that have the skills in, or to apply even?
Yeah, you have to connect to the communities first and foremost, and you have to be intentional about going out and sourcing and looking for diverse talent and creating environments that welcome people.
Katrina and Princess, again, thank you for joining us. For more information about diversifying tech, please visit our website, www.thelastSip.org, and click on How to Help. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Black travelers spend over $50 billion each year going to new places and seeing new things, I guess like Kanye in Wyoming. With Black travelers being younger and disproportionately women than the overall travel market, a number of sites and services have sprouted up to serve the growing demand. As the heart of the travel season is upon us, where should we book a flight to and what should we do? Here to ask us is a person who has done such travel, Renee Jackson, who took a year off to travel the world, going to 3 different continents and 12 countries during 12 months. Renee, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, no problem. I'm so happy to be here.
So can you talk about what spurred you to leave your job in New York City and say, I'm a Black woman, I'm at a midpoint in my career, but I'm going to travel the world?
So I've been seeing articles and Facebook posts of people who have left their job or just gone on these really long trips. And I always thought it was such a cool experience and so interesting because I've always loved traveling, but I've never done like a long trip.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to do it, but it was just a matter of when, how I saved the money, and when I knew I would be ready. So there was that part of it, but there was also sort of me feeling a little bit restless at work. I wasn't growing, I wasn't expanding as much as I wanted to. So I said, you know what? I might as well do it now. There's never going to be a perfect time. So I just took the leap of faith.
So did you visit any of the number of Black travel movement sites? Did you read books? Did you talk to anyone? Or did you literally just say, this is what I'm doing, and you called and you booked your ticket and you left?
Oh no, I sent a blast out to a whole bunch of friends and said, listen, I'm thinking of traveling. I remember you went to Colombia or you went to South Africa. Where did you go? Where did you stay? Do you know people there? And I also talked to people that were from those different countries that could kind of give me the inside track on where I should go and what I should see.
I'm wondering if you can just provide a list for our viewers of the places that you went as perhaps a thought-provoking exercise of places where they might visit.
I went to Costa Rica, Colombia, Peru, Argentina, Brazil, South Africa, Nigeria, Ethiopia, Egypt, Israel, Jordan, and Indonesia.
Mm-hmm.
And in each of those countries, I visited probably 3 or 4 cities.
Mm-hmm. Now, what's interesting to me about the places that you chose is that they're disproportionately Black and brown. You traveled overwhelmingly to places, as I mentioned, in South America, in Asia, in Africa. And so I'm wondering, was that conscious?
Well, the first was I was sort of driven by weather. I wanted to be in totally warm places the entire time that I was gone. Partly because I love warm weather and also because it would cut down on the amount of packing that I would have to do. I wouldn't have to take warm weather and cold weather.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that really nailed it for me is when I talked to a friend who quit his job and went to travel for 8 months. And he was like, listen, consider focusing on places where people are brown because that's what he does. He says it's awesome to go places where you're celebrated and not tolerated.
Yeah, I was in South Africa in December, and I had that exact same experience where you suddenly realize that on the planet, that the experience that we have is actually the minority experience, right? That like you go to most places on the planet, and people who look like us are actually in the majority. I'm wondering, so what did that experience do for you? I'm wondering, did that change you in any way?
Yeah, it definitely had an impact on me because it was It was so freeing. It was really the first time where I saw our culture, like you were just saying, as the majority, and for us to feel comfortable in our own skin in a really major way in these different parts of the world.
One last question. In terms of your travel experiences, you're gone for a year. You went to basically, on average, a country a month. What is a memory that stands out for you that kind of is emblematic of what it was like to be a Black woman, a young Black woman from the United States traveling abroad?
Oh my God, there were so many. One of my favorite days was my very last day in Indonesia. So one of the most beautiful things about Indonesia is they have amazing beaches, but they're really far from each other. So I met this guy who's a local, and he offered to drive me on his motorcycle around these beaches. So it was he and I on a motorcycle, no helmet, just going from beach to beach to beach as like throughout the day. And it just felt so liberating and so freeing.
Well, that's incredible. And what a great way to end our segment, and a great way to inspire people to hit the road this summer, to go to non-traditional places, to be brave, as you say, to experience freedom and a different note. I want to thank you so much for the bravery that you showed in doing that, and also for coming on our show tonight to tell us about your experiences. It's been great.
Oh, no problem. And I just want to say, like, the bravery was a huge part. So anybody who's watching this that's afraid, trust and believe that I was terrified, even up until the moment that I boarded my first flight to go to Costa Rica. I was terrified to quit. I was terrified to not be making money. I was terrified to be alone. Facing your fears is one of the best blessings in life.
Thank you so much again for coming on, and we look forward to perhaps following your travels in another year-long sojourn around the world. For more information about the Black Travel Movement and how you can hit the road, visit thelastSip.org and click on How to Help. We'll be right back. Nonprofits in historically marginalized communities are facing unprecedented demands in this era of backlash, whether it's immigration, LGBTQ issues, poverty, or violence against Black women and girls. These grassroots organizations are on the front lines of our most pressing social problems. So, how are the foundations which fund them responding to these new needs and challenges? Here to speak to us about that is Ana Oliveira, President and CEO of the New York Women's Foundation, the largest women's foundation in the United States and one of the largest in the world. In full disclosure, the New York Women's Foundation is a funder of The Last Sip. So, Ana, thanks for helping us get started and for joining us today. One of the things that your foundation has done under your tenure is actually focus on exactly the type of communities that you are speaking of.
Yes.
One of the interesting things is that in some ways you were slightly ahead of the curve of other foundations who somehow, many after 2016, have been scrambling to figure out how to totally focus on these communities that they now realize are no longer going to be getting whatever support they thought was happening from the federal government and are now under pressure. So I'm wondering, what made you decide to do that? Because changing the focus of an organization, particularly one like the New York Women's Foundation, is a hard thing to do.
I always like to say that the foundation was started with a real good proposition. 31 years ago, women of wealth and community leaders came together. And that in and of itself is an unusual thing. And we were perceived then as a non-viable, this group is not going to work out. They have women, they're very different. They're going to be not able to come together. But the reality is that women came together for a shared goal. And that goal was really to deal with the disparities, to deal with the inequality. Folk who are living the issues and who are on a daily basis creating the solutions to whatever the issues are need to be at the forefront. So, for instance, one of the reasons that we fund your program is because of your vision, is because of your work, is because of your leadership. Our job is to recognize that. Our job is to get the resources to support your leadership, your vision, and like yours, of many others.
people don't know how funders make funding decisions. And we know that for a vast majority of these organizations, foundations like yours, which give out $60 billion a year to small community organizations that are doing all the type of work that we're speaking about, don't understand how those decisions are made, but they're so crucial. But one of the things I wanted to just mention and hear your reaction, because I was so astounded by it when I heard, is the reason why a women's foundation is essential is that out of all the money that's given each year, only 7 cents of every dollar goes to programs that focus on women and girls.
Yes, it's an unfortunate reality, and definitely something that we and many others are working to change. So your first question about how funders make decisions, how transparent it is, how mysterious it is, if you have 20 foundations, you have 20 different ways of doing business, of making decisions. In our case, we are a public foundation, so we have a level of accountability that's a little different, is much bigger. In the case of a public foundation, when you get contributions from public supports, in our case, the public helps to make decisions and allocate the resources that we raise for the benefit, for the public good. So that kind of understanding of philanthropy, which is a little bit by, for, and about the people, in that sense, is the kind of philanthropy that we practice. At the foundation, we look at New York City, and when we talk about women and girls, all inclusive, cis, trans, what do we see? We see that the greatest disparities occur in communities of color, the less belonging to cis communities, right? The more they are, they have opportunity, but the less belonging, they're left behind. And if they come from communities that economically are underinvested, poorer communities, then we see that the life outcome disparities, the longevity of life, health, the ability to design one's life, the ability to going from surviving to thriving.
One of the biggest examples, I think, of everything that you're talking about that's hugely concrete that you just announced is the fact that you're partnering with Tarana Burke, who's the founder of the Me Too movement.
You know, here it is, an incredible leader who is a black woman who was not seen in her leadership and her work 10 years ago. Imagine where the world could be now if that had happened, if proper ability to see her leadership and then to invest in her leadership had occurred. How do we respond? We are late. We're 10 years late.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your insights and your wisdom with us today. Really appreciate it. And with our audience, a lot of whom are involved in social justice and never get to hear from someone like you. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you
for more information about the New York Women's Foundation and how to help Black women and girls in need, please go to our website, www.thelastSip.org, and click on How to Help. We'll be right back. In pop culture this week, Kim Kardashian's Morticia Adams routine at the White House seemed to work as President Trump announced that he would commute the sentence of Alice Johnson, allowing her to leave jail for her non-violent drug conviction. Azalea Banks attacked RuPaul on Twitter for allegedly copying one of her songs, but Azalea Banks' attacks are barely newsworthy. They happen with such stunning regularity. And in two separate tragedies, handbag designer Kate Spade and food icon Anthony Bourdain died in apparent suicides. If you or someone else you know is ever in crisis, please call the National Suicide Hotline at 1-800-273-8255. But the pop culture moment of the week came when the chief knowledge officer of CrossFit, Russell Berger, wrote in a tweet, "Don't these people know Twitter is dangerous by now? That LGBTQIA pride is, quote, a sin, close quote, showing indeed that a little knowledge is a dangerous thing." Now, apparently Berger knew that it was Pride Month, and he knew that CrossFit in Indianapolis, in another head-scratching moment, had chosen to cancel a Pride event. But what he did know is that for many gay people, CrossFit is like church, with shouting, testifying, and running in the aisles. And perhaps as important from a corporate perspective is that CrossFitters are wealthy, earning on average $150,000 a year. Well, whatever he forgot, the company's CEO told him to shut the quote F up, close quote, and to hide out for real. He said both of those things, which became easy to do because, well, Berger was fired. All this goes to show you that you never get in between a chief executive and his money. But it would be great if we could chalk Berger's outburst as ignorance and move on. However, it seems to be part of a growing pattern of outright public prejudice and discrimination against queer people. Just this week, the Supreme Court, on a technicality, gave the green light to a bakery in Colorado to deny service to gay people solely because, well, they were gay. And it underscores that for those who oddly thought that the fight for rights was over after gay marriage, that hard-fought gains hang by a thread. The good news, though, is that this CrossFit incident, which all happened in less than 24 hours, underscores that the Beehive has nothing on the LGBT community. Oh, wait. We are most of the Beehive. Well, that's all we have time for today. Thanks for joining us on The Last Sip, and keep an eye out for Season 2 of The Last Sip. Come sip our tea.